Hey, everybody, this is Josh,
And Shay.
and welcome to the Creator Podcast. And we are kind of bringing a new kind of creator to the platform, and we are super excited about it. So, Shay, like, how do we explain what she's kind of doing without telling too much?
Well, I think she's giving a new narrative to something that has had more of a one-sided narrative for the most part. And she's giving it a different light. And, Shine A Light ATL is the name of a company. So I'm really excited about it because I think a lot of us have mixed feelings about this topic. So I'm excited to talk to Colleen about it and hear what inspired her. And we'd like to hear what you guys think about it all.
Colleen, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you both.
And taking the time to be with us and talk about Shine A Light ATL.
Yeah.
Can you give us a little bit of, I guess, a synopsis of what you do?
Sure. So Shine A Light ATL is basically a campaign to help change perceptions about pit bull type dogs. Obviously, I'm based here in Atlanta, but it is a nationwide message and something that I've tried to get some other volunteers from other cities as well. And ultimately, what I look for is individuals who have rescued their pit bull type dog, and they're willing to sit for a short photo shoot, which I take the photos, and then they fill out basically a questionnaire that tells their story. It tells their rescue story. It tells what makes them unique, the dog unique. It tells, some of their silly little habits and things that they do. And really the goal is just to show that these dogs are just like any other family pet you bring into your home. And no matter, where you get this dog from, if you rescue, if you've gone to a breeder, whatever it is, there's really nothing different about them than your average golden retriever or, Chihuahua or whatever dog that you bring into your home. It's all the same.
Okay, very cool. And why? I mean, the obvious question: why pit bulls? Just because of the narrative that they have, or how did you find a love for pit bulls?
So that's actually, it's a little bit of a long story because it was kind of a long journey. I've always had dogs. I've always had animals in my life since I was a little kid. So I'm an animal lover of all kinds. But I really didn't know much about what was going on with these dogs until 2007, when Michael Vick was charged with dog fighting. And I'm a huge football fan, specifically the Atlanta Falcons. So this was really kind of, shocking. And so I watched a lot of the coverage and I was really upset by it and didn't know what I could do at that point. And then kind of moving along 2008, 2010, I became obsessed with this show called Dogtown, which was on National Geographic.
Yeah, I was watching that.
Yes, and it's based in at Best Friends Animal Sanctuary in Kanab, Utah. And they actually took in a lot of the dogs from the fighting ring. And they featured a lot of them. And so I actually ended up volunteering there in 2010. And I actually had the opportunity to meet one of the dogs. His name was Lucas. And he actually had been court ordered to stay there for the rest of his life because he was considered, I guess, a grand champion. So the court felt that it probably wasn't safe to adopt him out. All of the other dogs, for the most part, except I think there was maybe 3 or 4 that were court ordered to stay there, but all the others had been adopted into loving homes. A lot of them became canine good citizens. And so when I was there, one of the staff members pulls up with this brown dog, scars all over his face. He's sitting in a golf cart. So he's wearing a red collar, which means that he can only be handled by the staff. And so he jumps out of the car and I'm talking to the staff member, the woman. And while I'm talking, he's just looking up at me with that big pit bull smile and wagging his tail so hard, his entire body is moving. Like I could just tell he just wanted to come to me to like say hello. Like he was just so sweet. And I just had this realization. I was like, gosh, you can see what this dog went through, right? I mean, the scars are all over his face, missing pieces of his ear, scars on his body, and he was just the happiest guy. And so it just made me like, that was such a lasting impression for me that it made me realize that these dogs are actually the victims. They are actually the product of what humans make them be. And I knew then that someone had to be their voice. So something else had to be done for these dogs. So that's kind of how it started. Yeah.
So from being at this place and volunteering, how do they transition a dog, I guess? Like, it's been used to this kind of situation. What do you know what they do? Like how they gradually, like, you know, I guess show love?
Yeah, I know a little bit because I've read a lot about what the process was. And a lot of these dogs before, when they got these dogs from the property, they were evaluated by a ton of different people, you know, people from Humane Society and various different organizations for behavioral pieces, right? So are they dog friendly? Are they human friendly? You know, is there food issues? All these different things. And so what they end up doing, so they have all that data when they're brought into these rescues. And there was various places around the country where they went. Best Friends was just one of the biggest ones that took the most dogs. And so they at Best Friends, they have a ton of trainers and they work very slowly and they give these dogs time. Sometimes they're kept separately until they get, you know, a lot more comfortable. It really just depends on the dog, and they have kind of a, you know, a very specific way of dealing with each one to kind of reacclimate them back into being basically a pet.
That's so interesting. Isn't that fascinating, Josh?
Yeah, no, I love that actually all the dogs from the fighting ring got home. I mean, that's amazing because you think that they would be too damaged or too psychologically, you know, thought to fight constantly that they could not get to homes. And it's wonderful. It warms my heart to hear that they most of them got homes.
Yeah.
Now I'm just concerned about Lucas.
Yeah. Well, and so unfortunately Lucas did pass away, and he passed away from a disease that actually, it's called babesia. A lot of fighting dogs get it. But in the time that he was there, he was very well taken care of, very loved. He really, and then if you've ever seen pictures of or been to Best Friends, it is the most beautiful place. It's in the middle of these gorgeous canyons. So it's, you know, they have plenty of room. I mean, it was still a good life for him, even though he didn't have an individual family. He still had a much better life than what he had before.
Yeah.
So I grew up in Detroit, and
so did I.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. My dad lives in Ferndale.
Okay, so I grew up in Clarkston.
Oh, yeah, right there. So
Yeah.
you know what we grew up with hearing about pit bulls, because I mean, for me, I was always taught pit bulls were just mean dogs. Stay away from them. You know, like if you see one on the road, you cross the street.
Me too.
And my partner, actually my ex-partner, got one back in the early 2000s, and I did not like the pit bull at all when we first got him. But after I got to understand him, and he was a big pit bull. He was about 100 pounds.
Yeah.
And I've never had a pit bull in my whole life, never been around him. He was the sweetest dog I have ever had. My favorite thing was when my partner got up in the morning, he would come jump in the bed with me and we'd have an hour to cuddle.
Yeah.
Like, and how you talk about the smile. Yeah. They really do have a smile. They just have, and I've never felt so protected in my life though either, because he watched wherever I went. I've never, like, it was really supposed to be my partner's dog, but I think he really was my dog.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that they have such a bad rap, and we love that you're changing this narrative on this breed of dogs. And why did you come up with the photo shoot itself? Was that just, I love that you tell the stories of each owner.
Yeah.
Like, where did you come up with that idea?
Well, so we actually had adopted our own pit bull in 2013. His name's Charlie Brown. He was named that because his head was so much larger than his body at the time, because he was a stray that was pulled off the streets of Atlanta, So he was skinny and he still had the big head. So we said, okay, Charlie Brown is fitting for this dog. And so after I had adopted him, my sister had adopted one a few years before. I had a good friend that also adopted one in DC. And so we actually ended up going to Washington, DC in May 2014 for the 1 Million Pitbull March, which was put on by an organization called Stand Up for Pits, and that's run by Rebecca Corey, who's an actress and comedian. And the march really was to end breed-specific legislation nationwide. So we had people from all over the country gathered, and we all marched to the West Lawn, and it was a super, super cool event. And everyone, there were speakers after the march, and Rebecca Corey stood up on the stage and said, the way to overcome this is do something local. And so I'm like, okay, local. All right, let me think about this. So I went home, and I love photography. I am not a professional photographer by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, you can kind of see as the years have progressed, I think I've improved. But it's definitely a hobby for me. And honestly, I always joke that taking pictures of dogs is about 80% luck, because if they're running around and moving, it's luck. It's almost like taking a picture of a toddler, So it's very, very lucky business. But so I kind of thought to myself, okay, well, how can I combine taking pictures of cute dogs and trying to change the narrative? And so I came up with this idea that I wanted to do kind of a campaign that would change perceptions about these dogs. And the first thing I had to kind of come up with was the, what's the tagline? Like what is motivating me here? And I actually don't remember why I started looking at quotes. But I did, and I found one by MLK that really, really, really spoke to me. And it's stereotypes are like shadows, shine a light on them and they disappear, which is where the name Shine A Light came from. Yep. And quite honestly, whether it's human beings or dogs, discrimination still exists, and it's largely based on stereotypes. So I thought that quote was really, really appropriate. And then I kind of said, okay, so I've got that. I want to focus on rescue dogs specifically because rescue dogs in general get a bad rap, but then rescue dogs that are pit bulls get an even worse rap. Mm-hmm. And based on the numbers that are in our shelters right now and the number of dogs that are being euthanized because of space, because of breed-specific legislation, whatever it is, the majority of those are pit bulls. So I wanted to show people, not only change perceptions about these dogs, but also maybe encourage someone to go out and rescue one. And then I've been working in marketing with marketing companies for the last 20 years in software. And so I was like, well, I need something branded, which is where the bow ties come from. So the bow ties are actually, they have little light bulbs on them. And so my thought being is like, if you see a big blocky headed dog with a yellow bow tie on, then you know it's a Shine A Light dog. So I wanted to make sure that I had that consistently throughout. And even, I don't know if you can see in my shirt, you can see the dogs have little bow ties. So everywhere you're going to see the bow ties, and there's nothing scary about a dog with a bow tie. So, I think it's pretty, pretty self-explanatory.
I'm curious to know, like similar to Josh's experience, I did the same thing, like seeing a pit bull and I'd walk across the street. Yeah. And then I dated someone and they had 2 pit bulls. At first I was like, you need to put the dogs away when I come over. I'm like, but they were the nicest dogs. Yeah. And I just, it defied what I had been trained in my head to think of pit bulls. Sure. And it took me a while to kind of reconcile what I thought of pit bulls versus the sweetest dogs ever. Yeah. Like it's crazy. So it makes me wonder, do you get pushback from people about this, like you changing the narrative? Because at first when Josh told me, I was like, I don't know. But then I thought about those 2 dogs. I was like, she's right. Like, you can't just stereotype all dogs because of.
You have that put in your head already, like I did. Like that, they're bad dogs, all of them.
Right. Right. And it goes back to the stereotypes, right? The misconceptions that are kind of continually enforced, if it's via the media or just kind of social norms, that sort of thing. So for the most part, most of what I've been doing has been very positive. But I actually kind of want pushback because in my mind, there's no way to educate someone. I mean, short of having, and I always kind of joke, all you have to do is meet one.
Right.
To realize that these dogs are just like any other dog out there, right? And they're sweet and they're loving and they're cuddle bugs, and they're all of them are individuals. They're all going to have their own, you know, kind of flair on their personality. But that being said, it's you know, I think it's super important that if somebody pushes back, this is how we educate, right? So this is how we kind of talk about some of the actual statistics and the things that have been found through science and things like that to make people more comfortable. But quite honestly, I mean, I look for those opportunities to be able to educate, and I've had that opportunity a lot, even just in my own neighborhood, because, you know, we've brought these dogs home. Right. That it always works so much better if you've got one of these dogs next to you to kind of show and give an illustration, because they're like, oh, sure, she's saying that. So then my way to kind of create that is with the photos and these dog stories, and instead of being able to meet every single one. So I, you know, when Denver was working on trying to abolish BSL in that city, one of the largest cities to still have it, I sent them Shine A Light and said, look, use this, you know, like anytime, even up in Ontario, they had the same sort of battle. I'm always sending Shine A Light to give that example of, you know, these are just dogs. They're just regular sweet dogs with big fat heads and muscular bodies, and that's it. I mean, that's just what they are.
The law that you were talking about there are a lot of laws against these dogs, correct? Like, I mean, I know that a friend of mine was moving into an apartment complex, but they couldn't because their dog was half pit bull.
Right.
And they wouldn't allow them to have a 50-pound dog that was half pit bull. But I mean, that's almost like discrimination. I mean, that's somebody's pet, that's somebody's love, that's somebody's family.
Yeah.
And you're saying they can't come in to live. Do they have any, you know, I don't know. It just feels like it's not fair to single out the whole breed.
Absolutely. Very, very true. And it's done a lot. It's from insurance companies to housing, even in certain counties, you can't have your dog. It can be taken away from you. Even recently, Delta Airlines banned them as service dogs. And the transportation, the Department of Transportation, just basically said that is unlawful. Just recently that came out. So because there's a lot of military vets and folks that use these dogs as legitimate service dogs, that they are now basically discriminating against and not allowing them to get on a flight to go wherever they want to go. And so thankfully they basically said that was unlawful. So Delta can't enforce that anymore, which that was super upsetting to me as well, by the way, living in Atlanta. Yeah. Delta's my favorite airline, and like this is what they're doing. And I get it though, because they had a bad experience where a service dog ended up attacking a flight attendant, and they were trying to protect their employees, and I get it. However, it kind of probably went the other direction. The good news is they also, that guy had 2 service dogs, which not really needed for one person. They started to put some more things in place for service dogs on planes, which is great. So that is helpful. But a lot of the times people were bringing dogs that weren't service dogs. They weren't trained. They weren't, so that's where you run into, kind of these problems. And then all of a sudden the whole breed gets a bad rap.
Well, we just love that you're doing this. And I love that you actually show the stories of the owners because I think that also people have a pre-notion of who owns pit bulls too.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense? Like, yeah. I think people have like in their head, it's only going to be rappers or it's going to be whatever that have pit bulls. But in your stories, you can see there's all different types of people that own these pit bulls, or pit bull mixed breeds or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, I think it's funny because I actually added a couple of years ago, in the questionnaire profession, which is probably people might think is a weird thing, but you bring that up, that's exactly why. It's like people of all walks of life, families, artistic folks, you know, very corporate folks, like all different people are owned by these dogs, right? They are their family members, and so it's. I think it's an important point to make, and I think the family photos definitely illustrate that a lot. And I love it. I really love it when there's like little kids in a family, and then they tell the stories about how these dogs interact with their kids, and it's just the sweetest thing. It's wonderful.
I didn't realize that they're different looks like to pit bulls. Like, you know, I thought that a pit bull was just a pit bull. Like you just pick one type and that's it. So that was really interesting.
I think so the term pit bull technically is not a breed. So it is a very, there's a lot of kind of controversy around the term. It's kind of used in two ways. The pit bull term is kind of used as a generic moniker for several different breeds. So there's American Pit Bull Terrier, there's American Staffordshire Terrier, there's American Bully, there's sometimes American Bulldog. So there's a group of, again, blocky-headed muscular dogs that kind of the term pit bull covers. But then it's also used for any dog that actually has a similar look. So they may not have any of those breeds in them, but because they have a big fat head and a muscular body, they are considered a pit bull. So the hard part is when you look at breed-specific legislation, that actually is when we run into a problem. Or if there's been a dog attack or a dog bite, someone will say, oh, it's a pit bull, but I mean, they haven't done a DNA test. This is a mixed dog. You have no idea what it is. And so, but immediately all they say is pit bull. And so everyone's like, oh, these dogs are bad. These dogs are bad. So that's why they all look so very different, because they do, generally you see, you know, some common characteristics, but size of their head, shapes of their head, their eyes, you know, all that sort of stuff is because really that term is used to cover a lot of things. Now, there are a lot of people that want to get rid of that term altogether. I am of the opinion that I think it's easier to change the association with the term than it is to tell people just not to use it. It's just so ingrained in, I mean, people use it to describe people, which is not great, right? We don't want that, right? Like,
yeah,
okay, the pit bull. Yeah. We don't want that either. But I think, you know, my whole goal is, in fact, I use a hashtag when I post things, is take back the label, is to instead make pit bull a positive thing, right? So we've started seeing more news reports around these positive things. You know, a pit bull saved a little girl from a snake and did this and that. And so, like, that's what I want. I want the more positive. When people hear that term, they think of positive. So that's kind of another thing that I'm trying to do as well.
So people, when they think pit bull, they think that the one particular type of dog, right? What do you know the one I'm talking about, Josh? Like the main pit bull, I guess. I don't know if that's
probably like the American Pit Bull Terrier, probably.
So is that what it is? That because I was wondering what the name of that one is, because then it's even more unfair that face is identified with pit bulls as a whole, when there's a whole lot of other breeds of the same dog. So that makes it even more strange that we just put one face as this scary dog.
Yeah. Well, and it's also because when you look at, especially like counties that have breed-specific legislation and law enforcement has to go in and take your dog, all they'll do is this happened in Denver a lot. There's a great documentary called Beyond the Myth, and it talks about this. And they literally would go in and just identify visually. Right. Oh, that dog's got a fat head and has a muscular build. It's got to be a pit bull. We're taking it. You just can't do that. You have to, you know, unless you are going to a breeder, most of these dogs are mixed breeds, right? Especially ones you're coming from rescues or shelters or that sort of stuff. They're mixed with something else. They've been found on the street. God knows what their lineage is, right? But there was a pit bull in there somewhere, American Pit Bull Terrier or something like that. Staffordshire Terrier is very similar look too. So yeah, and so now you just have this whole grouping of any dog that has a fat head and a muscular build and a big mouth, because that's where that smile comes from, is in fact a pit bull. And oh, by the way, that means they're bad based on everything we've heard and everything else, right? So it is really it is unfortunate because you really do need to treat every dog, no matter what it looks like, no matter what its breed, as an individual, and learn about that dog and that dog's personalities and their quirks. And, you know, they all have them. Doesn't matter what breed they are, they all have them. So a lot of them we create, let's be honest, but but there, you really have to take the time to get to know each dog. It doesn't matter what type of a breed or what they're mixed with or whatever. You just have to get to know them.
Yeah. Well, I'm just always surprised because, like I told you earlier, my partner brought home the pit bull, the rescue one. He was white, and I called him cow dog because he had spots. He looked like a cow.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like, you know, but I had the same perception that Shay did, that it was this brown kind of dog, but they come in like the gray colors, they come in the brindle, they come in, and there's so many different variations. And that's what I love about the stories too, because you kind of break down that notion of what a pit bull looks like.
Yeah.
Because if you look through your stories, they're all different colors, they're all different shapes and sizes. Yeah, they have a couple of the same physical traits.
Yeah, right.
But they're all different. Some of them have like the big floppy ears. Some of them have like straight up ears.
Yeah.
I love those floppy ear ones.
I know. Well, and it's funny. So if you look at my sweatshirt again, you'll notice all the ear variations. So when we were celebrating our 5-year anniversary this year, so I actually had my logo redone with 5 dogs, and I wanted them to actually represent our volunteers, because, you know, I had my previous logo was one dog with the cropped ears, which we hate, but there's a lot of them in rescue, with the cropped ears, which is a stereotypical look for a pit bull. But quite honestly, yes, I do have dogs that volunteer that have cropped ears, but they all look like this. They all look like something different. And so I had my logo remade for our 5-year anniversary to really represent the dogs that we're featuring, because ultimately they don't, you know, especially the ears. That's one of the big differences. Yeah. I mean, you can get some serious radar ears in some of these dogs, and you're like, what are you mixed with? But yeah, I mean, it's very true. They're and because that term is used for such a broad grouping, that's why you get so much variation. So yeah.
What people do you have on staff, and like?
It's just me.
Oh, it's just you. Okay.
Me, yeah. So this is not my full-time job. This is something I do on weekends and when I have free time. And I have a lot of good social media networks that I use to kind of find volunteers. But it's, I take the pictures, I post the stories, I edit the pictures, which I take a lot of pictures in each sitting, so that can sometimes take a lot to pick the best one, because who can pick cute dog pictures? I mean, I have to pick 3, and it's very difficult. But yeah, so it's just me.
Do you ever do events or do like a calendar, or do you do anything like that people could see or be a part of?
So I have not done any events yet. And I did kind of create a whole store with all of our merch. And that right now, the proceeds that go to Stand Up for Pits, who was my motivator to start this. Oh, awesome. So I do have that. I've thought about, my significant other has told me I should create a coffee table book. I should, do all these different things. And I've thought about it. I just haven't gotten there yet.
Hey, no worries. You know how it is.
Yes, I know. So yeah.
You know, if you need some help, I can make a calendar template for you real quick.
Okay. Perfect.
So I would love to see something like that, because then you could donate, then you could really raise some money for your cause. And I think that what you're doing, why Shay and I really wanted to interview you, is because of the way that you're flipping the narrative, and the way that you've even opened our eyes onto, the different thoughts that we've held onto in our heads about this breed, and our background and our journey into learning more and being a more educated human on this.
Right.
I think is a great way, and I think it benefits everybody to really step back, and especially in these times, step back and think what you are getting fed by the media and whatever, and really take a look at it. Is this true? Is this really true? So we love that, and that's why we really wanted to interview you because you really flipped the script on this. So
Yeah, thank you. Thank
the
you.
same thing can be applied to all aspects of life. Like, what is the narrative that you've been put, in your head about anything or people or, just anything in general? And what is the reality of it? So it's interesting for us to kind of look back on that. Just like look at ourselves. And because now the whole Pitbull thing is, a different thing for me in terms
So you're going to go adopt one? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know if I'm going to adopt one yet. I don't think I'm there yet, but
Zara would love one.
She would.
Her daughter.
She's been asking one for a long time.
Oh.
With that point, what advice would you give someone? Let's say I am to consider it. What advice would you give for someone to, if they're considering adopting a rescue dog like a pit bull, or, just, getting one?
Yeah. So I think that it still holds true with any dog you rescue or get from a breeder, whatever it is. It's a lifelong commitment of the lifelong commitment of the dog. And they really are, like, you really need to kind of do your research on temperament and that sort of thing. And when they're in a shelter, if you don't really want to gamble because you really don't see their full personality, there's a ton of fosters out there that through rescue and through the shelters that they've had these dogs in their homes, and they know their personality now. They've been there for months in some cases, and so they can understand kind of what their personality is. So obviously picking the right dog for your family is key. If you don't like running, or you don't like, hiking or being active, then don't get an active dog. That kind of thing, right?
Yeah, don't get a husky.
Exactly. But the big thing was, especially around a pit bull type dog, you do have to be very aware of the discrimination that is still out there. Related to insurance, like home insurance, for example. There are some insurers that will not insure your home if you have a pit bull type dog in your home. So you've got to do your research there and understand kind of how it affects different areas. If you are in an apartment or in a condo and the HOA doesn't allow it, like, those are the things you need to figure out first before you get the dog. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't even think, because they think it's just a dog. Why should I have to worry about this? And then they bring the dog home and their landlord's like, no, you've got to move. And so it's good to do that research beforehand, just so that you know exactly what you're dealing with before you go and adopt a dog.
That's great advice. I would have never thought of that, because I would just adopt a dog, not even look at my bylaws or whatever.
Right.
That's fascinating.
So,
yeah.
But yeah, so how can people reach you or interact or see what you're doing? I know that you have a great Facebook page and your website's great to look at your stories. So
yeah. So of course we're on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And you can find us at Shine A Light ATL. And that's also our website, www.shinealightatl.com. And it's, I always joke, especially now that people are kind of staying home more and maybe you've run out of things to read. There's nothing better than just sitting down with the Shine A Light website and like reading all the past stories. Because I think I have close to 400 volunteers in the last 5 years. And I have done some out of the Atlanta area, been to Denver, DC area, so Baltimore and Virginia, Chicago. So definitely have, a lot of different stories. So if you're bored and on a cold day and you just want to kind of catch up on some heartwarming stories and see some cute dogs, it's a good way to spend the time. But yeah, so, and I think always too, we're always looking for volunteers. This year I had planned before COVID that as part of our 5-year anniversary, I was going to actually travel to 5 cities and feature dogs in each of those cities. It's always very challenging to find remote volunteers, because here's some random person who's looking to want to come and photograph you with your family and your dog and all this sort of stuff. But that's obviously going to be postponed until things get to a little bit more normal. So maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed, next year we can try for 5, maybe get to 6, depending on how much how long it takes for things to normalize a bit. But my goal is to still, because this is a national thing. It's not, even though I'm based here, I have ATL in the name. It's really more of a, because there was other things that were just Shine a Light, I had to have something that made it different. But it is a nation, it's a national message, right? These dogs are all over the country. They deserve people to be their voice and to advocate for them, and to understand that they are just, your typical family dog.
So if someone suspects like a pit bull is being abused or used for fighting, are there like hotline numbers or, a place you can call, like if you think something's going on or, a pit bull is being mistreated?
I think it varies depending on where you are. I know in California, they do have a hotline for dog fighting specifically. I mean, it also depends on the laws in the state. So here in Georgia, it's a felony. So 911 is your first call. And even, you could call animal control for any signs of abuse. And I've seen a lot of stories of people see, a neglected dog that's been, left outside with no cover, no water, no food. They call animal services, and they come and they evaluate the situation, and they will remove the dog if it's deemed to be an abuse situation. But for dog fighting, definitely 911 is the first place to go, at least here in Georgia. I think you can probably research, depending on where you live, what the different hotlines might be, if they have ones that are specific.
That's interesting, because you wouldn't think to call 911, right? But
right.
It makes sense.
Yeah, it's a felony crime, so yeah. It's serious business. So
that's good to know.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for spending time with us.
Oh, one more question, Josh.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
One more question.
Okay.
You want to ask it? You know the question, Josh.
Oh, yes. Okay, Colleen.
Yes.
What does being a creator mean to you?
So, it's interesting. I was thinking about this because I'm sure other people have said this. I don't consider myself a creator. I consider myself an advocate. I consider myself a voice. But I think you can obviously also associate that with, I'm creating a message. I'm creating a narrative, an alternate way of looking at things. So I think that's kind of how I would consider myself a creator. But really, it's a great question, because I really had to kind of think it through in my head. And I'm like, well, okay, yeah, I guess I create photographs, but really the bigger message is really what I'm creating, what I'm trying to achieve and advocate for and have people understand and educate is definitely what I'm creating.
Thank you so much for everybody listening, and thank you, Colleen, for spending the time with us and giving us education and showing us, shining a light on this beautiful breed of a dog that everybody should go back and think about your pre-notions on it, and give it another shot.
Go meet one.
Yes.
Find one and meet one.
That's true. That's
so, all right. And remember, everybody, it's more than art, it's life. Imagine more.